The Heart of the Family. Chapter 1. A Garden on the Hill. The house stood quietly on the hill, nestled between golden fields and wild vines, just where the land began to roll into green. It was nothing grand. Its roof was crooked in places, the front steps creaked under the morning dew, and the walls were decorated not with riches, but with time. And yet to Odessa and Adina it was the center of the universe. The sisters were as different as dawn and dusk, and yet they belonged together in a way that even the stars must have noticed. Odessa had a voice that filled every room. Her laughter came easily, like fire catching on dry wood, sudden, warm, impossible to ignore. She was the kind of child who climbed trees just to see what was on the other side of the wind. Scraped knees and tangled hair followed her like loyal pets. Adina, 3 years younger, moved like a breeze through a quiet room. She had a thoughtful face and eyes that seemed to see more than she ever said. When she spoke, people leaned in, because even at 7 years old, her words felt carefully chosen, as if she was building something with them. They were raised by two good people who had little and somehow gave everything. Their mother, Leora, had hands always busy with thread or bread or brushing curls from a forehead. She made things with love, blankets that still smelled like lavender in the winter, stories that stitched themselves into bedtime. Her voice, whether humming or reading or scolding gently, had a rhythm the girls would one day miss like breath. Their father, Jalen, was a quiet man whose kindness showed in the way he listened. He could fix a broken door and a broken heart with equal patience. He didn't smile often, but when he did, it made the world feel steady. Every night after supper, he would sit on the back step with Odessa and Adina between his arms, pointing out the stars and asking questions he never needed answers to. "Do you think trees remember when they were seeds?" he asked one night, as Adina leaned against his shoulder. Odessa shrugged. "I think they're too busy growing." Jalen smiled. "Maybe that's how we're meant to be." It was in those years that everything felt possible. They had goats, a garden, and a wooden fence that barely stood straight. They had long afternoons full of chores, then racing through the fields. Odessa pretended to be a queen with a wooden sword. Adina kept records in a journal she stitched together with leftover fabric and thread. "We'll rule something one day," Odessa declared one spring morning, raising a stick high. "A kingdom maybe, or the skies." Adina giggled from under a wide-brimmed hat, shielding her journal from the sun. "Only if we rule it kindly." "We'll be the best," Odessa said confidently. "No," Adina said, looking up at her sister. "We'll just be us. And that will be enough." Their life wasn't easy, but it was whole. There were nights when the fire was low and the bread had to be shared thinner. There were mornings when the goats escaped and Leora had to chase them barefoot through the dew. There were days when Odessa came home with bruised knuckles after standing up for someone smaller. And there were quiet hours when Adina sat alone under the willow tree, writing about a world that felt too big for her small hands. But through it all, they had each other, more than sisters. They were roots growing in the same soil, different shapes, different strength, but forever intertwined. They didn't know the storm was coming. They didn't yet understand how hard the world could be. How grief could steal warmth from walls that once held laughter. How love, when tested, could either bend or become something sharper. But they would learn together. And when the world tried to tear them apart, when hunger and sorrow and war pressed against their family, Odessa and Adina would not break. They would rise, and they would become not just the daughters of a quiet house on a hill, but the women who would one day change the world.